one could be a little bit of a controversial one. I don't think so too much, but the words I've used might say that. So, why I hate the Fraser Group. Now, for those that don't know, the Fraser Group is a massive house in the UK, of UK high street franchises and businesses, such as Flannels, Sports Direct, the House of Fraser, many others, and it's owned by a majority share of just over 60% by a gentleman called Mike Ashley. Now, the reason why I've wrote this one down today, the reason why I'm going through a specific case is because what Mike Ashley does is he represents the low-margin, fast fashion economy of the high street distribution. So, you know, he works with Sports Direct, Flannels. He owns multiple parts of other brands, even such as, I think, Boohoo. He owns about 20% of ASOS. He's definitely just a big is it the word conglomerate? Or I should probably have got that first, but he's basically just a big player in the monopoly of the market that is the high street purchases. So for those that maybe aren't in the UK, maybe don't know about Sports Direct is a UK outlet specialising in sportswear, so kind of brands like Slazenger, Carrymore, Everlast, Umbro, brands to that degree. This is going to be such a hard video to do as I do this because I'm going to forget what I'm even doing. But the kind of point of what I'm getting to of this video is, like the title says, or like the title may say, like, you know, why do I hate the Fraser Group, or why do I dislike what it represents? And the reason why I've chose this one is because I actually dislike it for a few reasons. I do want a disclaimer as well. I don't want this channel to be about specific brands to like go, I'm anti this, but I do think that it's important to understand how the ecosystem of all of the fashion industry, the high street state of play works with retail, to understand again where the stock market of secondhand sits in a comparison of how it sits right now with people who can buy new clothes. So, you know, Sports Direct, one of the biggest things you could say as a con is the reason why it's difficult to compete on some degree with Sports Direct is that they offer very affordable new sportswear or very affordable new clothing. Now, I think I've not been to a Sports Direct for a while. Again, I do like to go to these shops often. I feel that by going often, it gives me I have some actual leverage to talk on it rather than just sort of speaking blindly about a topic. But I think it's relatively competitive pricing and probably not super cheap across the whole board. But one of the main factors with what's the problem with like the Fraser Group as such is that Mike Ashley has just kind of gone through this absolute like bull in a china shop of buying as many brands, having as many like small shares in these companies, and essentially being the Amazon of the high street. Like, realistically, it's not good for one person to own so many because it doesn't really create a great like diversity of owners, diversity of opinions, and it's just as much as power as possible to one individual person. It's kind of not like ideal. But one thing that he does that I think that needs to be made clear, and you know, this is more just for like insightful purposes, but just so you lot know kind of an understanding about how Mike Ashley works as a representation of Sports Direct, to then look at the whole bigger picture of how this could affect the Fraser Group as a result of how this could affect the actual purchasing of new clothing on the high street in relation to online and thus forth. It's kind of complex. It's like a domino effect. So the one big domino effect, or one big point of a domino effect that I see, is that what the Fraser Group do is they buy brands out. So one of Sports Direct's big leverage points were that they bought Carrymore, they bought parts of, they own Everlast, Umbro, I'm sure, Lonsdale, I'm sure. So these sort of like Sondico probably, these let's say sub brands, these sub brands that are less desirable, have less hype around them. The reason why he's bought them is because the price is obviously very cheap. And then what he does by a result of owning the brand is he has the intellectual property rights to use the brand's name and distribute it. So what's different about this is, so take Carrymore, for example. Carrymore used to be like a subgrade adventure brand in that sort of like North Face, Regatta, Berghaus, Low Alpine, these sorts of brands. So Carrymore sat, like the walking boots, they sat in like almost a relatively good competitive like space. Essentially, like they provided an actual purpose for quality goods, and when they were made by Carrymore themselves, they were probably like made cohesively and efficiently. However, the issue is, and like the issue with all of things, the price was probably out of people's reach, and there was other options that they preferred, or there was just certain factors that changed, that Carrymore got to the point where they were at the submission of having to sell their brand for it to be a better outcome for them. And what places like Sports Direct do is they buy a brand like Carrymore, and then they just go and get it like copy and paste, made as fast as possible in Asia, in India, anywhere out of the UK, as cheap as possible, like pennies to the item, and import it back, have Carrymore dotted on there and sold in Sports Direct. But the change that happens is that the Carrymore that you buy from Sports Direct now isn't a brand that was represented with quality, and it's the old brand that literally carried that name to the point where now you wouldn't be buying Carrymore. It should say Sports Direct's Carrymore, because it's kind of like, it's a subgrade of the actual brand itself. And this is what's interesting, is what people don't realise is, so say Flannels, for example, as well. Flannels has brands like Gucci, Versace, Ralph Lauren, all these sorts of brands. And to my knowledge, with the intellectual property rights of how it works, is because he owns that brand, you can like buy intellectual property rights to redistribute these brands, but they're not actually original, authentic pieces by the brand. So something you see in Flannels by Gucci might be Gucci like made by the intellectual property of the Fraser group. However, it wouldn't be Gucci that you would go and see in the Gucci store. And that does pose the question of, how does that affect the market of the fashion? If someone like, could you say that's essentially bootleg? I'm not going to say that. I'm not trying to catch a case right now, because me v the Fraser group, I'll be closed down tomorrow, unfortunately. However, I'm coming with like as an open opinion as possible to just have this discussion about it. And again, I don't hate any part of the Fraser group directly, but what I do think is it is not beneficial for the whole ecosystem of where we sit with things. I don't think that the process that he has for how he does it is, I think what he does is he's just a fast fashion distributor. Like, he wants to have as much made across the sea and brought back, and that's all these other like parts of brands that he owns. That'll be the whole angle and area of it. And you know, not really used to like firing a shot at anyone in particular, because yeah, it's a bit of a strange angle. I don't want to get sidetracked with what the main goal is, but I think that it's just good to understand the perspective of what these brands, what these people that represent these brands actually do, and how it actually sits. So if you're, at your local Flannels, or you're at your local Sports Direct, for whatever reason, maybe you need some new socks, or maybe you're just passing Flannels, go and check one of the Gucci tops in Flannels, take a photo of it, and go and try and find it online. There may be some situations where he has them imported, but based on the business model that he's created and how everything he does is like pennies to the pound of fighting it, whether it's, he is still in this country the highest shareholder of 0-hour contracts. And at this point, I think we live in a world where most people have figured out how to make money on the internet. People have just got their own hustles, and maybe people are less concerned or worried by the 0-hour contracts. But for the majority that still are on them, it's a non-guaranteed, like, it's no job security, is it? So yeah, he kind of represents this sort of like skimming by, saving as many pounds and pennies as possible, and sort of doing that to everybody on the way up or way down or whichever way. So yeah, bit of a different one. just an overall conversation about Mike Ashley, about the Fraser Group. Yeah, interesting. I wish I had something positive to say. I guess if anything that you can take from this is just that what I take from these is I like to learn about where the brands are and what these brands are doing, because I try and zoom out, drone shot, look at the bigger ecosystem of secondhand and of fast fashion. Like, how is this man who is buying all parts of different brands and essentially wanting to copy and paste the same business model he's got right now, how is that going to impact over time? He obviously appeals to an affordable market, but how does that work over time? The sort of taking everything and having it fast fashion imported and buying brands and stuff. Part of the problem, part of the bigger problem. But yeah, that's my take on that. And if you have any opinions or thoughts on that, please feel free to drop a comment and I will either reply in a comment or make another video about it. I won't make too many videos about this topic. I think that would be too much reason to be found out and shut down. But no, I'm very small fish in the media pool. I don't know. Right. Anyway, lots of love, guys.